I was standing in my aunt's kitchen, balancing a plate of cranberry ham and mashed potatoes, when my cousin said the words that froze the world around me. "Your parents hosted such a cozy Christmas dinner last night." For a moment, I thought she was joking until she showed me the photo. My mother smiling beneath the same tree I had bought, my father carving roast beef, my brother holding Coco like a postcard son. They had celebrated without me. That night, something inside me broke, and something far colder began to take shape. I held the plate with 2 hands until the fork slipped and struck the rim with a sound that flattened everything else. The metallic clatter did not belong to the kitchen. It belonged to my chest. For a moment, the noise stretched long enough for me to understand what had already happened. I had driven 9 hours to be surprised, and instead I had arrived into someone else's celebration. I am Claire Morgan. I had planned the trip the way one plans a small, private rescue 2 days off work, a folded map, a tree that would fit in the back of my SUV, and a sense that things at home could be fixed by presence alone. The drive from Charlotte to Saratoga had been a quiet ritual. I had packed wrapping paper, a bottle of cheap wine, and the little artificial tree I had bought the year before because my mother's back was bad, and she had let me carry the boxes. I had told myself that arriving at the front door with hands full would be enough to thaw anything brittle. That is the memory that plays in my head as the kitchen around me continues. Canned laughter, the warmth of bulbs strung soft against plaster, the scent of cinnamon that always makes me think of my own hands. My cousin Maya, cheeks flushed from laughter, leaned in and said with practiced brightness, "It was so cozy. Your mom posted the picture look." She turned her phone toward me as though the light from the screen were an ordinary gift. The photograph on the phone was the exact frame that had kept me awake the previous night. My own tree standing by their living room window, ornaments I had wrapped around the branches, a strand of gold ribbon I had tied until my wrists hurt. In the photo, Linda smiled in her green sweater, Robert steadied a carving knife with the same pride he always wore, and Tyler held a mug of cocoa like a boy stealing warmth. The image was perfect, family perfect, and unmistakably ours. My fork slipped again, but this time it was deliberate. The plate wobbled and I set it down without looking. The room seemed to close around a single phrase that Maya repeated like a consolation and an excuse. "Your mom said you were probably too busy." The words were light. The ache behind them was not. I stepped out of the kitchen because the air inside had become too thick to breathe. The hallway into which I moved narrowed, and the sounds of the party pushed at the door like a tide. Hands, voices, and the clink of glass receded as though the house itself had decided that I no longer belonged in its center. In that narrow corridor, I found Maya again. She met my question with a half shrug and a smile that had always been good at erasing things. "We did not want to pressure you," she said. "It just happened so fast. It should have been a clean answer I could accept." It was not. There is a peculiar cruelty in being offered a reason that could be true, because it leaves you with a choice between believing an accident and recognizing design. I watched her carefully for a long second, searching for the small betrayal in her face, but she had the frankness of someone who simply did not see the ledger that I kept of favors and transfers and the nights I had stayed up past midnight to wrap gifts. Outside, the air hit my face like a slap. The cold was immediate and honest. The front yard's plastic Santa swayed with a creaking smile. Snow began to fall in soft sheets that muffled the world. The kitchen window, seen from the porch, reflected back my own shape, still as an outline, alive with lights. I cupped my phone and scrolled instinctively. No missed calls. No messages of "wish you were here." Tyler's story blinked at me. A loop of him, my parents and friends raising mugs. The caption, "Family time." The boomerang turned like a small, casual knife. I had learned to measure my obligations in transactions. That day, I had not intended to think in numbers, yet that is what my thumb found before my mind made a decision. The bank application sat where I used it, honest and indifferent. A list of recurring payments waited in quiet rows: mortgage, utilities, car insurance, a tuition draft that had been scheduled for months. I had set those entries up years ago because they asked me to, I had done it because it was easier for everyone when I took on the work. Standing by the dim streetlight as snow silvered the hood of the car, I let my thumb hover over the edit button for a long breath. There was a rhythm to that small gesture. One press could keep the miracle of their comfortable life intact. One press could continue the work I had always done in the shadows. But my thumb did not move. I did not press it that night, I said into the cold. Not as confession, but as a statement the way one states the weather. The words floated away and were swallowed by snowfall. Inside, the party continued. Outside, the car's clock read midnight. The road back to Charlotte was a dark thread waiting to be taken up again. The choice lived in the palm of my hand and in the silence between one heartbeat and the next. I closed the car door and let the heater breathe a shallow warmth. The engine hummed steady under me. In that small humming cocoon, I watched my thumb rest above the screen and felt the tilt of a life change. The night had made the decision visible. It had not yet forced my hand. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and old coffee. Fluorescent light pooled in the corners. Claire sat at the small desk with the black notebook open in front of her. She had written the title in deliberate block letters, The Cost of Easy. The words looked larger than the page deserved. They had weight. She tapped the pen against the margin until the sound matched the slow clock on the wall. The decision had arrived first as a tightness behind her ribs and then as a thin, bright clarity. She slid the laptop toward her, the bank login already saved under muscle memory. For years, she had been the silent architect of their comfort, setting up recurring drafts, transferring funds at a moment's notice, smoothing financial quarrels with a few keystrokes. Those acts had been invisible stitches in a house built on other people's habit, her habit. Tonight, the stitches had frayed. Tonight, she intended to see the fabric for what it had always been. She did not dramatize the act. There was no ceremony. The bank page presented itself in plain blue and white. Mortgage, utilities, car insurance, tuition. She clicked on the first line, then the second. A confirmation window appeared, clinical and indifferent. Her fingertip hovered, counted, then pressed. The cursor blinked. A small audible ping announced the cancellation. She moved through the list in a rhythm soon punctuated by 3 soft pings, each a small release in her chest. When the last confirmation ding sounded, she felt neither triumph nor relief. She felt simply unburdened, as if returning a borrowed weight to someone who had never agreed to carry it. Back at the Morgan house, the damage did not unfold like a melodrama. It arrived as a succession of taut, everyday sounds. A phone ringing at odd hours. Footsteps pacing across hardwood, the muffled, rehearsed voice of a customer service agent explaining courtesy calls and pending notices. The camera of Claire's mind cut between her motel solitude and their living room unrest. Linda stood at the kitchen island, the phone pressed to her ear, words coming out in small, clipped sentences. Robert paced the driveway, shoulders sloped with a fatigue that seemed to belong to someone else, speaking into a hand held with professional calm until his voice trembled. Tyler tapped at a screen with the insouciance of youth until the texts began to arrive. School notices, late fee warnings, automated messages that treated human panic like a routine administrative error. When Linda called Claire, there was a new strain in her voice. She did not hide it under the polished sweetness that had always been her shield. "Sweetheart," she said, "the mortgage company called. They said a payment did not go through. Can you check when you have time?" Claire answered with a composure that surprised her. She did not let the familiar flinch of apology seep into her voice. "I already checked," she said. "I canceled it." A pause like a held breath. Linda's next sentence sounded practiced. "We thought you might have been tied up with work. It was last minute and we did not want to pressure you." Claire did not allow the words to soften the tilt of truth. "You have been asking me to patch things for years," she said. "You asked me to make your life easier. That is over." The line went quiet, then filled with the soft stammering of excuses. Claire listened. She had no need to make herself small for them again. She let the silence expand until Linda filled the space with that careful voice of someone trying on regret. The confrontation with Tyler required neither subtlety nor ceremony. She met him at a diner midway between motel and house, a neutral space with chrome chairs and a coffee pot that always gurgled. Tyler arrived late, hair still disheveled from sleep, his expression one of that clear expectation children cultivate when they rely on a safety net. "I thought you would take care of it," he said. The sentence carried no accusation, only the plain assumption of dependence. "You are old enough to solve your own problems," Claire replied. She watched his face change as if time had carved a new plane into him. "You can call the school. You can find a way." He flailed with reasons that sounded small and rehearsed. He had never seen the spreadsheet she kept, the receipts in the folder, the nights she had sat up after work to enter payments. He had not been required to know. Claire watched disappointment settle on him like dust, and there was a moment of pity that did not dissolve her resolve. She did not make his life easier for him now. Word moved through their community faster than any family conversation could. A realtor's postcard found its way under a neighbor's door. Church ladies texted in small clusters. A bank's recorded voice left a precise, unemotional message about automatic payments discontinued. It was a courtesy call that felt to others like a scandal. The Morgans' tidy reputation cracked. People asked questions that Linda had spent a lifetime avoiding. Claire did not revel in the unraveling. She felt culpable for the consequences in a way that no punitive pleasure could cover. This was not a story of revenge so much as an experiment in consequence. She had to know whether a life built on convenience could stand without her hands propping it up. The answer, for now, was unfolding in a way that made her chest ache with a complicated sympathy. She met Mia in a cafe the next morning, under light that did not warm the bones. Mia listened with a fierceness that had steadied Claire through other storms. "Are you trying to punish them?" Mia asked, not unkindly. "Or are you trying to teach them to stand?" The question lodged like a small stone. Claire could not deny the punitive edges of her action. She could not pretend it was only a lesson. Yet no single motive encapsulated the whole of it. "I wanted to stop being the person who disappears into other people's stability," she said. "I wanted to see what happens when I do not move." Mia suggested alternatives, financial counseling, mediation, a staged conversation where everyone could be honest without the theater of crisis. Claire listened, the corners of her resolve softening, but she did not accept any immediate return to the old arrangement. She had stepped back. She needed to know the edges of that space. The confrontation tightened like a coil. Notices arrived in the mail, crisp and unreadable until they landed at Linda's hands. Tyler sent a frantic group text that read like a small emergency. Then, as twilight gathered and snow began to hush the world into a muffled gray, there was a knock on Claire's motel door. She sat very still, the conversation with Mia still warm in her ear. There was a soft, urgent voice on the other side. "Claire," Linda said. Her tone was not polished. It was raw, small, and pleading all at once. "Please, Claire. We need you." Claire's hand closed around the doorknob. The metal was cool. Her thumb moved along the curve and found a firmness she had not known she might keep. The room smelled of bleach and old coffee. The lamp hummed. Outside the window, the snow continued its slow, impartial fall. She held the doorknob and did not turn it. She turned the doorknob at last. It was a small, decisive movement, the kind that tasted of ordinary courage. Linda stood in the pale motel light like someone who had been rehearsing for decades and finally run out of rehearsals. Her hair was pinned back, her hands folded in front of her as if she were holding a fragile thing. Robert sat in the idling car, the heater breathing fog onto the windows. He watched them with an expression that belonged to a man who had not expected to be called to witness consequence. They had driven to the motel not because they had wanted drama, but because the house they had relied upon no longer offered privacy from the practicalities of life. The legal language of banking had become public in the form of notices and polite voicemails. Linda's voice, when it came, was breathless and small. "Claire," she said. "We did not mean—" Claire did not allow the unfinished sentence to comfort her. She had rehearsed one precise memory against the tide of years, the December when she had wrapped every present until her fingers trembled, and then, at dawn, stacked the packages by the hallway and watched her mother charm guests as if she had done everything herself. It was a single image, precise as a photograph. Claire on the floor with ribbon curling beneath her nails. Linda smiling to friends as she accepted compliments on how perfectly everything had turned out. "You used my work as proof," Claire said quietly. "You used my mornings and my paychecks to show everyone you were fine?" Her voice did not shake. It held an odd steadiness, as if she were reading from a ledger that had always been truthful. Linda's face shifted. The practiced armor of politeness thinned and revealed something like exhaustion. "I was afraid," she confessed. "I thought if people believed we were fine, then maybe we could be fine." It was cowardice. "I'm sorry, the apology was not a bomb." It was the first true thing Linda had offered in years, and it landed with a hard, necessary weight. Robert got out of the car then, slow and deliberate, and for the first time there was no speech to soften him. He simply stood and looked at Claire as if trying to understand the person she had become. The collapse came like ordinary weather. Notices were posted on the front door, crisp and bureaucratic. A realtor's sign went up later in the yard, a small flag stating plainly what everyone had tried to avoid. The home was in default. Boxes appeared in quiet corners, moving like migrating birds toward packing vans. Tyler, suddenly given the task of adulthood, found himself on hold with school administrators and calling friends for borrowed funds. The family's life did not implode with theatrical flourish. It rearranged itself with the steady, implacable logic of consequence. Claire watched without savoring it. She visited the house on a gray afternoon and left a small box on the porch, not as an accusation, but as a pause. Inside the box, she placed a photograph. A seasonally sunlit frame of the four of them by the lake 2 summers before. A candid that showed all of their youth and cracks and possibilities. There was a short note tucked beneath the glass, written so her mother could read it without words like weapons. For memory. For truth. Then she walked away, leaving the house to itself. The work of repair began without dramatic reconciliations. Rachel Clark, a sister figure who had kept a respectful distance for years, called and said she wanted to understand. Sophie, a quieter cousin who had once been complicit in smiling around hard things, reached out and admitted that she had not known. Mia sat with Claire and insisted on practical measures. "If you help, then they will learn how to manage with help that is honest," she said. They arranged a mediation. Not a courtroom, but a room with neutral chairs and a counselor who kept time like a metronome. The conversation was awkward and halting. Linda spoke about pride and fear. Robert spoke about shame and misplaced expectations. Tyler spoke with quick apologies and the awkwardness of a son who had suddenly been asked to be a man. Claire listened and then spoke with clear, unadorned boundaries. "No more autopays," she said. "If I help, it will be with conditions. You will agree to transparency accounting, budgeting, help from a professional. I will not be the quiet backstop any longer." She articulated the rules simply, as if cataloging steps in a careful experiment. The counselor nodded, and something like structure settled into the room. The agreement was not a pardon. It was an attempt at accountability. Months passed in the small, unremarkable ways that mend fragile things. Claire learned to let a call go to voicemail and feel nothing like panic. She bought a small plant and named the act of watering it a kind of practice, a daily attention that was not erasing. She paid her own rent without the habitual pinch of guilt. She took a Saturday for herself and met Mia for brunch where they spoke of lighter things and ordinary pleasures books, a favorite song, a new bakery down the street. There were calls from Linda that carried shards of shame and tenderness. Short, awkward conversations in which apology edged toward something more honest. Once, Linda said simply, "I'm sorry, not because it makes this go away, but because I was wrong." Claire heard those words as if they were the beginning of a sentence that would take time to complete. She did not offer immediate absolution. She said instead, "I hear you. Let us keep talking." Repair proved neither neat nor swift. There were days when Claire wondered if she had been too harsh. Nights when she felt a strange isolation that was not pain, but a blankness as wide as possibility. Then there were small reversals, a text from Tyler telling her he had set up a budget, A message from Rachel that read, "Mom cried and then asked for help. Tiny. Human shifts that did not erase the past but suggested change." The winter turned toward spring. Claire placed the little tree she had once bought into the window of her apartment. It was modest, its light softer than the large display she had built for other people. She lit a candle and labeled it renewal, not with triumph, but with an intention she would return to each morning. One evening, she sat at her kitchen table with her black notebook open. Her pen hovered, and she wrote a single line that felt like both a conclusion and a beginning. Silence was the first lesson. Truth will be the long work. She left the pen on the page and watched the smoke from the candle rise and unravel into the ceiling. Her phone rang. The name on the screen was Linda, Claire answered. They spoke as people who had not yet finished learning how to stay in the same room without wounding each other. Neither voice was perfect. Both were honest. When they hung up, Claire did not feel the final burn of victory. She felt something steadier, a small, hardening peace that came from choosing herself and from listening to the long, honest work that would follow. The last image I carried from that winter was not the pile of notices or the realtor's small flag in the front yard. It was a pale tree in my own apartment window, its lights no longer arranged for other people but placed there as a promise to myself. The choice to stop repairing what had been quietly broken was not an act of cruelty. It was a decision to tell the truth, about the cost of being easy for others and the price one pays when affection is measured by what one provides rather than who one is. This story is not about punishment as spectacle. It is about consequence as clarity. When we carry another person's safety net for years, we become intimate with their fear and their convenience. We learn the secret language of their relief. We learn too late sometimes that gratitude can calcify into entitlement. The moment we stop obscuring the cracks, the house falls into its own gravity. The collapse is bitter, messy, and instructive, because it forces a reckoning that polite apologies never will. There is a lesson here that is both small and immense. Boundaries are not walls meant to hurt. They are frames intended to hold a life together. Saying no is not a withdrawal of love. It is the beginning of honest management. Help that comes without accountability becomes a habit nobody can cure. And silence, when used with intention, can be the clearest form of communication. It makes room for truth to arrive. Repair, if it is to be real, will not be quick. It will not be a single phone call that erases a decade of accommodation. It will be the long, awkward work of relearning how to ask, how to admit fault, and how to agree to change. It will be the slow rebuilding of trust through concrete acts, not eloquent words. That is the hard, hopeful thing. Growth is possible, but it must be earned. If this story resonated with you, or if you have carried the quiet weight of invisible labor for someone else, you are not alone. I invite you to share in the comments one small moment when you chose yourself, or one boundary that changed the shape of your life. Your words may help someone else find the courage to stop holding what is not theirs. If you would like more stories that examine the quiet, complicated parts of family, work, and personal reckoning, consider subscribing. These stories are meant to be a mirror and a witness, a space where truth is spoken and where the difficult work of living honestly begins.